Hello everyone and welcome to Techstrong TV. Today is Monday, August 15th, and I'm your host, Natan Solomon. In today's show, we'll bring you some awesome interviews with incredible guests from around the world, so stay tuned. As always, I'll start with our Techstrong news recap, filling you in on the biggest tech headlines that are making waves. Then, Alan sits down with David A. Wheeler, Director of Open Source Supply Chain Security at the Linux Foundation. In this interview, Alan and David will discuss some of the ways that the industry is working to improve security, focusing especially on efforts by the Linux Foundation's Open Source Security Foundation. Next, Alan speaks with Tracy Reagan and Steve Taylor, the CEO and CTO of DeployHub. Tracy and Steve will talk about their involvement with Persia, an open source software community initiative that utilizes blockchain technology to secure software packages from vulnerabilities and malicious code. They also dive into Ortelius, a unified microservice catalog designed to track and version your microservice software supply chain. Alan then talks with Torin Sandel, VP of Open Source at Styra. Alan and Torin will discuss Styra's new OPA-based authorization engine, Styra Run. We then bring you to RSA, where Charlene sat down with Lou Crocker, Director of Customer Engineering at Digital.ai. Charlene and Lou talk about how Digital.ai consolidates 5 companies with the intent of bringing value stream management to the market. We're then joined by our very own Cody J. Brown, who will hop on to tell us about some upcoming webinars. Then, we have the premiere of Engineering the Change, a new segment following the 3 winners of the Engineering the Change Scholarship, as they tackle the 10-week intensive bootcamp and prepare for a career in software engineering. We then go to KubeCon Cloud Native Con, where Mitch met with Stephen Chin, VP of Developer Relations at JFrog. In this interview, Mitch and Stephen talk about securing the open source supply chain and Persia, an open source project that seeks to secure software from vulnerabilities and malicious code. Next, we have View with Vizard. First, Mike interviews Michael Tal, Technical Director of Votiro. The two discuss why cyber attacks against healthcare organizations are increasing in volume and sophistication. In the second interview, Mike sits down with Sonali Shah, Chief Security Strategist at Invicti Security, and the two dive into a report on the state of web application security in the federal government. We then go back to RSA, where Alan met up with Teresa Lee, Head of Claims and Risk Engineering at Cowbell Cyber. In this discussion, Alan and Teresa discuss how cyber insurance actually works and how businesses can best leverage their policies. Finally, at KubeCon Cloud Native Con, Alan sat down with a software engineer at PlanetScale, Deepti Sigareddy, and she shares her journey as a woman in tech and how she became the lead maintainer of Vitess, an open source database scaling system for MySQL. That's what we have coming up for you here on Techstrong TV. Let's get the show started. Enjoy! Hi again, everyone. Here are the headlines for August 15th. First, Facebook announced an update on its plans to bring end-to-end encryption to its Messenger chat platform. Starting this week, Facebook has begun testing this feature with a small group of people, with plans to roll out end-to-end encryption as the default for all chats in 2023. Currently, Messenger offers end-to-end on a per-chat basis, but these are only used by those who are conscious of delicate security needs. End-to-end encryption would provide a layer of security to the over 1 billion people who use Messenger worldwide, so this would be a big transformation to say the least. Next, the FCC has decided to reject Elon Musk's Starlink subsidy to expand rural internet access on the ground because it failed to meet program requirements. The FCC determined that Starlink could not deliver the promised service as it initially applied for the $896 million subsidy back in 2020. LTD Broadband, another applicant, also lost its $1.3 billion subsidy. As rural internet access continues to fall behind, leaving many Americans disconnected, it'll be interesting to see which company takes on this initiative next. Another tech giant making headlines is Amazon, which launched AWS Private 5G, a service that allows companies to deploy their own private 5G networks. AWS rolled out this service to customers in Ohio, North Virginia, and Oregon, with plans to roll it out internationally in the near future. Companies can order hardware and SIM cards directly from AWS, and AWS will provide all the necessary software and APIs needed to set up private mobile networks. However, AWS only supports the creation of 4G LTE networks currently, and it will support 5G in the future to give low latency and predictable levels of throughput. In other news, Disney has announced price increases starting in December for its popular streaming service Disney+. This was announced alongside the introduction of an ad-supported tier with the same price customers are currently paying. This will be the second price increase for Disney Plus since it was released in 2019. The move is similar to other streaming services, which have increased prices and released ad-supported tiers. With so much competition among streaming services, companies are looking for ways to make the economics of streaming viable, as prices are kept artificially low to compete against rivals. Next, South Korea pardoned J.Y. Lee, vice chairman of Samsung Electronics. Lee was the company's de facto leader since his father suffered a heart attack back in 2014, but was charged with bribery back in 2017. Lee was released from prison in August of 2021, but wouldn't be able to work for Samsung for 5 years under Korean law. Lee has been an unregistered director, but his pardon may now allow him to take control of Samsung. This is in part of an effort by the Korean government to overcome the current economic crisis, and we'll have to wait and see if any other dominoes fall as part of this initiative. On Security Boulevard, we have an article on how an open-source cybersecurity schema framework promised to advance cybersecurity data sharing. At Black Hat USA 2022, AWS, Splunk, and IBM launched the framework with the intent to address interoperability, and it has received support from several cybersecurity vendors. To learn more about the Open Cybersecurity Schema Framework, check out Security Boulevard. On DevOps.com, we have an article discussing Cycle's recent addition of static application security testing and container scanning capabilities to its software composition analysis platform. With this new expansion, Cycle makes it possible to provide more content to software remediation efforts by pulling data across the entire software development cycle. Learn more about Cycode's new features on DevOps.com. On Container Journal, we have an article announcing how Aqua Security has found a new type of cryptojacking attack. This new attack uses containers to consume network bandwidth instead of CPUs to mine cryptocurrencies. While cryptojacking is seen as a nuisance crime, it can lead to more dangerous attacks if these attacks get taken up by other cybercriminals with more malicious intents. To learn more about this new form of cryptojacking, check out Container Journal. And that's today's Techstrong News Recap.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey everyone, welcome to Techstrong TV for another interview. You know, for those of you who've watched Techstrong regularly, you know, I guess it was last month, actually it was almost 2 months ago now, a month and a half, we were down in Austin, Texas for the Linux Foundation Open Source Summit, and we had a chance to talk to just a wide variety of some amazing people. One of the people we met there and spoke with is David Wheeler. And I invited David, I said, hey, let's continue the conversation. David is more than a bit of an expert on the whole open source software supply chain, so it's not even open source, software supply chain security, SBOMs, and everything that we've been talking about recently. He's he'll tell you about his position with Linux Foundation, etc. David, welcome back to Techstrong TV. Great to have you.
Thank you so very much.
Pleasure. So, David, I didn't want to embarrass you, but I didn't, I'm
going to let you
tell your own story. Give our audience a little background about David Wheeler.
Okay. Well, let's see. Always hard to answer, figure out what is most relevant. But I guess I should start by my title. I'm the Director of Open Source Supply Chain Security. And besides filling in some bingo cards, What that really means is that I am a subject matter expert. I cannot possibly rewrite all the open source software out there. I certainly can't change everyone's processes, but what I can do is go out and work with various projects and foundations to help them improve the security both during development and out when it's in operations, because unfortunately the software out there is under attack, and we're not going to be able to convince attackers to stop attacking. So we need to deal with the situation as it actually is. The good news is that there's a lot that can be done. A lot of developers really aren't told how to develop secure software, and so a good part of my job is doing things like pointing people information to help them deal with the world as it actually is. Yep. Let's see, a little bit about me more generally. I have various degrees and such. I've been a developer for a very long time in a variety of programming languages, and I basically just try to show up and ask, how can I help?
Absolutely. Hey, let's be clear. I think we discussed it the last time you and I spoke. When we talk about open source software supply chain security, that is not to imply that open source is somehow implicitly less secure than, closed source or commercial software. Software supply chain security is an issue regardless of open source or not.
That's absolutely right. Attackers don't care what the license is. They just want to get whatever ill-gotten gains they're interested in.
Absolutely. So I want to make that clear. However, that being said, the Linux Foundation, the Open Source Security Foundation, and beyond that, the White House and the federal government and many other organizations and entities out there have really shined a light recently on open source software supply chain security, because open source is almost a victim of its own success.
When you have
90%, right, of organizations running open source.
In fact, numbers I've got, Synopsys did a study. They found 98% of the code bases. 98%. And by the way, that's the ones they could verify. I think that number's low.
Right. Well, how much lower can it? Can only be 2%.
That's exactly right.
But no, seriously, I mean, this reminds me back in the 90s when they said, well, Macs are inherently more secure because you don't see any viruses from Mac. Well, when you only had 2% of the market, right, no, it didn't pay to attack it. But not that Windows was so secure, but the fact is open source is so successful today that it's put a big bullseye on its back in some regard. I mentioned the Open Source Software Foundation, OSSF.
Yes, OpenSSF, yes.
Yeah, OpenSSF, part of Linux Foundation. And they really are, they're putting a lot of money and resources behind this cause. But as part of that, they're really gathering momentum and followers across the world to address this, right?
Right. Yep.
Talk about that, David.
Absolutely. Happy to. So, I think, first of all, you're absolutely right. Attackers are attacking open source software simply because it's all over. There are potential advantages to open source from a security vantage point. I mean, the big potential advantage of open source is that anyone can review it so that anyone can look for problems, look for vulnerabilities, look for malicious code. But like many things, potentials are not, but like anyone who's had children will know the potentials are not always realized.
Yeah.
So,
I'll agree. I tell them all the time, the worst thing in the world, wasted potential.
And the thing, my kids are awesome, by the way. This is not meant to be an attack on children. But my point, though, is that potential is not always realized. And unfortunately, we are really pushing against a broader deficit that's been going on for decades in the software development world, which is, in general, we aren't teaching our software developers how to write more secure software. So unfortunately, both open source and proprietary software developers typically often don't know how to develop secure software. The people who review the open source, if they don't know what to look for either, that mean they can help in other ways, but not necessarily anything involving security because they don't know either. I'm sure we'll go talk about the very specific actions that are being taken, but one of the first things that the OpenSSF did, and you can blame me, I led some of the efforts on this, is developing courses on how to develop more secure software. And by the way, the course that the OpenSSF developed called the Security Fundamentals, it's not specific to open source at all. How to write more secure software is a general issue. It's not really specific at all. But obviously, if your developers don't know how to write secure software, they're not going to do it. So we need to make sure that information gets out really to all developers, but that certainly includes the developers of the open source software, the reviewers, and so on. Hey, if nothing else, if your listeners remember nothing else, if they remember, hey, if I'm a developer, I should, and I've never taken a course on how to develop secure software, I should take a course. Go to openssf.org. There's a training tab. You can go click and take it. If you manage software developers, get them to take a course. It doesn't take that long, and that's the sort of thing that can give you just endless dividends.
Absolutely.
David, I had a guest on Techstrong the other day, my friend Tyler Jewell. Tyler is he manages a Dell. It's Dell's VC firm, and I forget the name of it now. Something like Dell Financial Investments, but it's Dell's VC arm.
Okay.
And he just did a study, and in his mind, he thinks we've reached what he calls peak DevOps. In that, we've been in this agile world for 20 plus years now, and that we are not seeing productivity gains from developers because developers have too much on their plate, right? And that when we say developers need to learn to develop more secure software, developers have to have more responsibility around developing secure software and security in general. We're not doing them any favors because it's already damn near impossible to be a good developer at scale, right? There are individuals who are, but when we look at it as an industry.
Yeah, I'm going to push back a little bit on that if you don't mind.
I'm glad you did. I wanted to too, but I'm just the interviewer.
I agree with the premise that oftentimes developers are asked to do too much. This is the challenge for anybody who's asked to create things. In fact, you don't have to ask about software. Your customers, your clients, whoever it is who wants whatever product you're producing, they always want more than you can possibly give, especially in time allotted. Okay, so I don't think that's particularly unique to the world of software at all. That said, as far as knowing how to develop secure software and actually executing it, first of all, as far as knowledge goes, I'm sorry, we should expect not that developers are like world-leading experts on a topic, but they need to know the basics. If you don't know how to use any programming language, you're not going to be writing much software. Okay.
Yep.
If you expect to write software to exist in the real world where attackers exist, then you need to know the basics about how to counter attackers. Now, we're not talking about, hey, spend the next 5 years in classes. The fundamentals course, we estimate it takes about 16 hours to take. Okay, it's a computer-based training. You take a couple hours a day. You can wrap that up and knock that out relatively quickly. You can. There are various courses that go more in depth, but even then, we're not talking change your career. We're talking relatively small amounts of time that produce lifelong dividends. Now, it's absolutely true that just learning isn't enough. There's other things that folks need to do. I'm glad you mentioned DevOps, and a lot of folks will say DevSecOps or SecDevOps, because you need more than just knowing stuff. People are still going to make mistakes even if they know things. But that said, there's things that you can do after that. The most obvious one is you need to get tools into your CI pipelines that look for vulnerabilities. Will they sometimes miss things? Yes. Will they sometimes report things that really are false positives? Yes. That's why you need education, so you know how to use your tools. Okay? Just like a compiler doesn't teach people how to write software. Okay? The tools don't teach you how to write secure software, but they can help find problems that if you know something, you can quickly act on it. And there's other things you can do. I can't remember if we talked about, happy to go in more depth. But like if you're developing an open source project, there's the OpenSSF best practices badge, which is basically a list of things that are good things to do. And you can say, hey, do these things. You can monitor for the vulnerabilities in the code you depend on, and make sure you're prepared to do updates, because you're going to depend on a lot of other software. That's normal today. It's crazy to try to rewrite the world from scratch. So since a lot of the software a lot of software is software you didn't write, but software you depend on, you need to have tools to warn you when a vulnerability is found, and you need to be prepared to rapidly update. And that means use package managers. Don't try to do this stuff by hand. That's ridiculous. Manual management of dependencies is a terrible idea at the scale people are working at now. Another is automated tests. Automate. Because when that vulnerability is reported, and it's not if, it's when. You don't know where, but you know it's going to happen. All you should need to do is tell your package manager, update the packages I'm depending on. It depends on whether or not a library application, but these are details I don't want to get in right now. And run your tests. Everything works still. Great. Ship. Okay? You're ready to go. But if you're not ready to go, then people say, oh my gosh, there's a vulnerability in one of the dependencies. How do I deal with this? It's going to take me months. Well, you already screwed up. You designed your whole process to fail because you know that's going to happen. So you need to be prepared for the things that certainly will happen. There's other things you can do too, but it's these kinds of things of thinking ahead and being prepared, looking at your dependencies before you bring them in, being prepared when a vulnerability is found in them. These are not rocket science.
Let me play devil's advocate a little bit.
Please do. This is the fun part.
So
I don't disagree with anything you said. Package management, getting alerted when there's an update to a component you're using, or even a whole application or dependency or what have you.
Yep.
But I think when you talk to the average developer, they say, look, I developed this 6 months ago. I'm working on 3 different other projects. This ain't on me. This isn't on me, right? This should be the SRE guy or the DevOps engineer or someone, because all we're doing is updating a library here.
Right.
That's fine. As long as the answer is it's someone's job. Okay.
That's fair enough.
So when you say developer, you're talking about the whole department, not the individual necessarily.
I'm talking about anybody who touches and somehow changes software. And they can have lots of titles. I actually prefer the word developer, because the word programmer often implies some very narrow, specific skills, whereas the word developer is anyone who helps develop software, and that includes any kind of maintenance. Okay,
Got it.
There's a phrase I've liked to use, and I don't want to try it on you as well. There's only one program in the world. It's called Hello World. Everything else is maintenance. Okay.
Okay. Very cool. Absolutely.
I although people usually smile when I say, I think it really has a point. software typically isn't done in the same sense as I built a screw and here's the screw and I don't want it to change. Most software is living. It changes over time. And so we need to, that is the way of software. And so we need to expect that.
I agree with you 100%. Hey, we only, these interviews are only 15 or so minutes. I want to use our remaining time to help our audience. You mentioned some of the training over on OpenSSF.
Can you give us some specifics? Are these classes expensive? Are they long? How can people get it under their belt?
Absolutely.
Because I'm sure we've got people out here who say, I would do it if it's not crazy.
What's involved?
Okay, well, I'll tell you what. The number one thing is learn. Okay, I'm less focused on what. That said, the OpenSSF has specifically developed a course for developers, people who maintain software. And so if you go to openssf.org, look on the top, you'll see a little training tab. And then the very first thing you'll see is Secure Software Development Fundamentals courses. Click on that. Okay. And what you'll find is there's several ways you can get, but the easy way to do it is there's just developing secure software. It's called LFD 121. It's completely free. It costs you exactly $0. It's computer, it's run completely on computer, so you do it whatever pace you want.
At your own pace, self-paced.
Yeah, self-paced. And what's great is that not only is the course itself free, but the certificate you can get from that is free. And then you can show people, hey, I actually learned this material. Right.
So now, let me be clear. We're not here trying to sell you something or
No, this is free. I get nothing. Yeah, I get zero money from this. This helps the world.
Make sure people know, because David, everyone has an angle, and everyone. But this is truly something. Go do this. It's free. It's self-paced. You don't have to do it at a set time. Do it on your time, but you'll be better for it.
Right. Now, some people have this same course materials actually also available on edX. A lot of people like edX, and if you like edX, great. We make it available on edX. If you want to take, it does have a certificate. That one does cost money. So if you want to do it through edX, and people sometimes do, that's great. Carry forward.
Their choice.
But your choice, if you do it through the LF training, it's the same material, and that costs nothing. But really, as I said, our goal is we want to make sure that people learn the information. In fact, we're even if you're like an accredited educational institution, come talk to us. We're trying to get that actually available within the learning management systems of like universities and colleges, because we're trying to get the knowledge out to the people who need it. And we fully acknowledge
that's a whole other subject, David.
Are our schools preparing our developers, our cybersecurity professionals, for what they need to succeed in the market?
I have a quick answer for you. It's the word no.
I agree with
you, but it's something we've got to keep working at. There's
Absolutely.
too many jobs open, then there's too many people out there who are just not skilled in the way we need them.
Right, and that's not to say that there are some awesome people within the colleges, university. I teach at one, so there's some great folks. But this is an area where the formal educational system is lagging the needs of society, and so we need to. This is something that we need to keep working at.
Absolutely, David. I need to jump off for our next guest. I want to thank you. As always, you have an open invitation. Anytime you want to come on, we're here. All right, man?
Thank you. Thank you so very much.
Seeing you, David Wheeler.
Linux Foundation, Open Source Software Security Supply Chain. We'll be back.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey, everyone. Welcome back to Techstrong TV. I am happy to be joined by a good friend of ours here at Techstrong TV and actually a first-time guest on Techstrong TV. Let me introduce you, first of all, to Steve Taylor and secondly, to Tracy Reagan. Hey, Tracy. Hey, Steve. How are you?
We're good.
Doing good.
Great. Steve, you're the first timer here, so we're going to make you go first. Why don't you introduce yourself to our audience and give them a little bit of your background?
Alrighty. So my name is Steve Taylor. I am the CTO of Deploy Hub and one of the lead contributors to the Ortelius open source project that's under the CD Foundation. Been in the DevOps world forever, and pretty much keep a pulse on everything that's happening in new technology that's coming out.
Love it. Thank you, and thanks for joining us. Tracy, you've been here once or twice before, but for people who maybe aren't familiar, give them your background.
I am the CEO of Deploy Hub. Steve and I co-founded Deploy Hub a couple of years back to take on the challenge of consolidating all the DevOps intelligence into a governance catalog, a hub of deployment data, so to speak. I am also on I have a history of open source. I actually was helped create the Eclipse Foundation way back in the day. I also helped start the Continuous Delivery Foundation. I was on the board of that for a few years. I'm now on the Open SSF board because security and SBOMs is all that we ever talk about. And Steve is being humble. He is also a main driver of the Persia project, which is also an open source project, and he serves on the Technology Oversight Committee for the CD Foundation, as well as myself. So we're a very busy.
Very busy and very involved.
Yes.
I was actually out in Israel at Yalla DevOps about 2 or 3 weeks ago, and we had a good interview on Persia. So Stephen Chin wasn't there, but we had a chance to meet with Fred. Yeah, and there was another person, one of the folks from the company they acquired. It's now part of JFrog. Excuse me?
Was it Suhendra?
No. It was a gentleman. Anyway, whatever. We spoke a lot about Persia and how that all fits in there, and it's an exciting project. But for today, I want to focus in, first of all, with all the open source stuff and all of the foundational work you guys are involved in, I don't want people to lose sight of Deploy Hub either. So, you know what? I don't care if it's Steve or Tracy. Why don't you give our audience a little bit? What's Deploy Hub up to these days, and what is it about?
So Deploy Hub is what we would call a governance catalog. Governance around the supply chain that you consume and all of its parts and pieces and how all those parts and pieces relate. We all know what a service catalog is. Pretty much. A service catalog, if you are enterprises use service catalogs to say, oh, we're using this version of Oracle, we're using, this version of all these enterprise tools. Now, if you break that down into microservices, you have a micro service catalog or a governance catalog that tracks the microservices, their usage, their provenance, their dependencies, their SBOMs, their CVEs, and a lot of other, what I like to call DevOps intelligence that we need to start using in order to build more intelligent systems, more intelligent DevOps systems, starting to add AI and machine learning into it. Without that central catalog, you don't have a central place to start cooking the data, and that's what we're all about.
Very cool. And then the other thing that you guys are really kind of driving is and I'm going to mispronounce it, but it's not Aurelius.
Ortelius.
Ortelius. Aurelius is something else, but the Ortelius project. Assume our audience doesn't know anything about it. Steve, tell them what it is.
Yeah, so Abraham Ortelius, who we named the project after, was one of the first people to create a world atlas. And he did it by pulling together little maps from all these other cartographers across the world. So he was actually like the first open source guy back in, I think it was 1870.
1570.
1670.
15.
I'll get the
A
date.
long time ago.
So he was able to pull it all together, and that's kind of the basis of Ortelius, the open source project, is to pull together all this data that's out there around your software. We have, especially in the microservices world, you have your Docker container, for example. Then that Docker container contains other packages. Those packages contain other packages. And we get this huge web of information that has to be sorted through to make sense out of it. And that's where we, in the Ortelius project, are pulling together everything to leverage that data and make it useful to people. We've been generating and creating and using SBOMs forever, the software bill of materials, but it would only come into play when an auditor marched down to your desk and said, where did this come from? And what we're doing with Ortelius and Deploy Hub is bringing that into the everyday world. So every day you can understand where you stand with your software and how it's being affected as developers drive change.
I love it. Excellent. All right. Have we set the foundation here? We clear?
Well, I think we should mention that Ortelius is incubating at the Continuous Delivery Foundation. It is an open source project.
So it's a CDF, right?
Yes.
CDF managed product in the incubation stage.
Yes.
Which our audience is familiar, the sandbox, incubation, graduation, etc. Glad we got this out of the way. Let's now talk about the news. JC, you want to share with us?
So we started working again, going back to the Open Source Security Foundation. We started working with some of the challenges that they are currently having. And I noticed I probably can't be heard that well because my microphone's over there. So we started looking at the challenges. And one of the challenges around SBOMs is SBOM security itself. SBOMs right now are not immutable. They're basically a text file. And when you talk about SBOMs and open source and building applications, everybody uses tons and tons of open source, right? Every time one of those underlying components, an open source component, gets updated, you have a new version of your application, and you have a new SBOM, and you have a new set of CVEs. Now, those SBOMs are in text files, and they sit underneath pretty much the DevOps pipeline. And as Steve pointed out, somebody might say, did you generate an SBOM for this? Well, now SBOMs are more important. The Biden administration has said, hey, if you're turning software over to the government, you better be able to generate an SBOM. How do you do that in a microservices world? Well, that's consuming all these lower level pieces. You don't have the concept of an application anymore. So what we thought about was, how do you create an immutable SBOM audit trail that can track versions and changes and aggregate that up to the logical application level? And we started thinking about, this is a really, really good project or use case for a ledger. If we can build that into a ledger, then we might have a centralized place for enterprises, for open source consumers to be able to start tracking changes in their open source supply chain, along with the SBOMs and the CVEs. So we applied for a small grant to do a proof of concept with XRP, their XRP ledger. It's hosted by Ripple. And we're very excited to say we got awarded the grant to do that POC. It's a small grant, $75K. But we'll be looking at how to build out that immutable SBOM audit trail so that we can have SBOMs everywhere. For example, I'm sure that there's some answers to this question, but I want to know what the SBOM for the new Log4j looks like. I also want to know, as a company, which applications that I have pushed out to my production environment are consuming that version of Log4j, and what is the CVE report, and what does the SBOM look like for that? That at a microservice application level, that is a hard question to answer. but we can do it. We have the technology, and now we're going to build that out through a blockchain.
I love that you're using blockchain with it too to make it. It's great use of the technology. So let me be clear here too, right? Having been in the security world for a long time, there are some things that cross over from security to compliance, PII, personally identifiable information. It was always a security target, if you will, right? That we want to protect PII. But when it was codified into various security regulations, it became a checkbox in the compliance world. And people, when that transition takes place, people start checking the box just for the sake of checking the box. And they lose sight of why we check that box. Because that PII is important. It could be really damaging or really, used in bad ways. I am hoping that SBOMs don't become the next checkbox. That, hey, I've got this great project that, automatically using blockchain generates my SBOM. Check. Biden administration wants SBOMs. CISA says we need SBOMs. Check. But what we don't do is look at the SBOM and say, oh, geez, we got to update the package. Or we've updated the package, so now we have the latest package. But have we run any tests to make sure that that package hasn't impacted something else we're doing? Or, like taking two drugs that kind of offset each other. Does that package conflict with something, right? I'm afraid that we're just going to say, check, compliant, and we lose sight of how all of this fits in. Whose job is it? Is it the developer? Is it the DevOps engineer? Is it the security folk? Is it the SRE, right? Who's responsible beyond the checkbox?
Well, first of all, I want to tell you that somebody recently, I don't remember who said it was on one of the skill up hours, one of the DOI skill up hours, and they said, security is not a checkbox. So that is a really good point because...
Yes, it's not. And anybody in security would tell you that. But I will also tell you that we went through a period in security 5 years ago. I call it the compliance era, where it became very checkboxy.
It is. And if you look at an SBOM, it's not pretty. And you have it out there, and yes, I generated it. So what do you want me to do with it? I did it. I have it. It's out there. If you want to look at it, it's there. What do you want me to do with it?
And I think that's the issue.
And being able to consume the information, we generated it, but what are we doing with it? Consuming it, doing something with the data. And that's what we are focused on at Deploy Hub and Ortelius is consuming. We're consumers of SBOMs, and we want to pull that data in so we can start presenting it in easily consumable ways. We're lazy at heart. I mean, we want things served to us. An SBOM is definitely not served to us. It's something you have to generate. It's in the text file. You have to try to read through it to determine if there's any problems. At best, what you should be using it for is to parse it and then generate a CVE report to see what your package vulnerabilities are. Consumption and adoption of the SBOM process has to do with the difficulty of it being in a simple text file and it being very, very ugly, to be quite honest. We want to make it pretty and consumable. So that we don't make it
there's an opportunity
to ingest SBOMs and create not work tickets, because no one wants to have more work tickets created or anything, but create follow-ups, create workflow out of that SBOM. And hey, I'm just throwing it out. I know two people who might be interested in that over at Deploy Hub and stuff, but it's an idea.
So one of the things that, because Ortelius and Deploy Hub are gathering all this data, and when we talk about SBOMs, there's nested SBOMs, so it gets really complex. And what we are doing is when we talk about the XRPL ledger, we're persisting that snapshot of all those SBOMs onto the blockchain, which allow us to then look at your application historically. So if I want to be able to search all my applications in my enterprise to see if any of them are using the log4j, that's a simple query that we're able to return that information. And it's not marching off and telling all the developers, go tell me if you're doing this stuff. It's literally a couple clicks and you got your answer. And then because it's in a ledger, we can see when that is fixed. So we can see that it was introduced at this point, and then it was resolved. 2 months later, that vulnerability was resolved. So that history and that search capability are very important for software developers. Now, the next thing that allows us to do when we have all this data is to add in open policy agents. So each company can decide what they trust. What is their version of trust? So that's where you can do OPA against the information that Deploy Hub has, and in your pipeline decide, is this a risk I'm willing to take, or is it something I need to stop? So that's where we're kind of headed with the XRPL, and we're very excited about how it's going to really help us back the versioning of the logical application for developers.
Love it. Guys, we're running low on time. People who want to get more information about the project, about Deploy Hub, can you give us some URLs?
Deployhub.com is the easiest one. Ortelius is ORTELIUS.io. And you can find us on the CD Foundation as well. So cd.foundation, go to projects and you'll find Ortelius there as well.
Fantastic. Hey, Steve, you made it through your first Techstrong TV appearance. Congratulations. Now we're going to expect you back more often, though. So
I'd love to be back.
All right. I look forward to seeing you. Tracy, it's always good to see you, of course. I don't know if you're going to be in Dublin for this Linux Foundation OSSF thing.
No, we were not in
might.
Dublin.
I won't.
But Techstrong might. But if not, Detroit for KubeCon?
More than likely.
KubeCon in Detroit in November. Thinking about it.
I don't know if it's November or October now.
I know it's just going to be cold there.
Yes, it will be.
We did,
and you know how much I love the cold living down here. But hopefully we'll see you somewhere.
I'll be in Orlando in DevOps World.
We're not going to be there. Sorry, but we'll catch up. It's like, we'll get there. Hey, you can drive down from Orlando, but we'll talk.
Okay.
For now, we're going to take a break here on Techstrong TV. We'll be back.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey everyone, welcome to another Techstrong TV interview. I'm happy to be sharing some exciting news coming from our friends at Styra today. Let me introduce you to Torrin Sandel. He's been on our show before. Hey Torrin, nice to see you.
Hey Alan, good morning. Good to see you.
Torrin, if you don't mind, before we jump on the news, I not everyone knows Torrin Sandel, I bet. Some of them do. Maybe, I don't know. Tell them, give a little background, Torrin.
Sure. Thanks, Alan. So my name is Torrin Sandel. I'm the VP of Open Source at Styra. We are, first and foremost, we're the creators and maintainers of Open Policy Agent, which is an open source project. It's part of the Cloud Native Computing Foundation that helps organizations of all sizes solve authorization across the stack. So whether you're talking about, Kubernetes or microservices or applications, we help you control access to those services with our technology. So we are sort of the authorization company. We help organizations, enterprises of all sizes solve authorization problems.
And Torin, you were kind of the original, I don't know if it's the words creator or an original driver, let's say, of OPA.
Yeah, for sure. So I was an early employee at Styra, and I'm one of the co-creators of the Open Policy Agent project. So I did a lot of the early R&D on the project, the early kind of development and evangelism for it. And so I'm still, super active within the community. I talk to all of the users on a regular basis, and I get to hear about the different problems that people are taking OPA, out and solve all the different problems people are solving with OPA, right, around authorization in large organizations.
Excellent. And then, not to belabor the point, but OPA is, of course, a contributed project managed by the CNCF.
That's correct.
And I forget, is it graduated already or?
Yeah. So
graduated project.
We donated OPA to the CNCF. Styra donated OPA to the CNCF in 2018. And the CNCF has sort of like a laddered, tiered structure for projects as they kind of grow and mature and gain more contributors and more users. They become more kind of like recognized. And so in 2021, actually, OPA was promoted to the highest tier, the graduated tier within CNCF, along with other projects like Kubernetes and Prometheus. And that was just kind of like a reflection of where the project was at in terms of maturity, right? In terms of how wide the user base was, how heavily it's used in production environments, as well as how many organizations are active within the community, contributing, supporting, and so on.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a subjective kind of just, let's give this one a graduation or, let's move this one from sandbox to incubation. There are objective criteria, metrics that need to be met, and OPA is met. And it's the highest level, meaning that it has the widest, base of users, of contributors, there's good maintainers and everything else. And so, look, both Styra and the CNCF have worked very closely together really to help contribute to make OPA probably, it's graduated. It's one of the most successful projects of the, 40 or 60 projects that are in CNCF these days.
That's right. Yeah, the ecosystem has grown quite a bit, and Styra, we're the creators of it. Like, we wrote the code, we designed it, we released it to the CNCF, and the CNCF provides that really kind of that sort of like neutral home base for the project, right? That allows organizations from across the world to kind of collaborate on it in sort of a vendor neutral manner.
Absolutely. All right, we did our background. Let's focus in on Styra a little bit, right? And Styra offers like hosted OPA as well as premium functionality right around it and other offerings as well. But big news from Styra today in that front. Torin, I'm going to ask you if you wouldn't mind sharing with our audience.
Yeah, for sure. So what we're really excited to announce, and what we announced about 2 weeks ago now, is the sort of availability of a new offering from Styra called Styra Run. And what Styra Run is it's an enterprise-grade authorization as a service offering that basically allows application developers to drop authorization into their applications through very, very simple drop-in APIs that are OPA compatible. So before Styra Run, developers that wanted to implement authorization using Open Policy Agent had to do a lot of heavy lifting around running OPA themselves in their own environments. And importantly, they had to put a lot of thought and time and effort into the management of all the data, all the contextual information that informs authorization decisions inside of applications. They had to think about how they were going to design, develop, and operate that data distribution system. And what we've done with Styra Run is removed all of that heavy lifting from the lives of developers that need to implement authorization inside of applications. And we give it to them sort of in a turnkey drop-in manner for their applications.
I love it. Let's talk a little bit kind of the genesis of this. Why are you guys doing this now?
For sure. Yeah. So, over the course of the history of the company, we created OPA in the very early days, and we created, sort of the technology that would allow large organizations to manage authorization across the stack. We saw organizations adopt OPA for all kinds of different use cases, right? We've seen OPA heavily adopted within Kubernetes to enforce all kinds of safeguards and guardrails within Kubernetes environments. We've seen developers leverage OPA to enforce access control within microservice environments, since really the east-west traffic inside of large microservice environments where you might have thousands of different services all talking to each other, all this kind of internal traffic that powers these large systems. We've seen OPA applied all over the place. And one area where we saw a lot of interest around OPA adoption over the last couple of years was this sort of general problem of implementing authorization functionality in SaaS applications, right? So anytime you build a SaaS application, anytime you want to take a SaaS application to market, there's this kind of pesky little problem that you have to solve around authorization inside the application, right? If you're a consumer application, if you're like, for example, like a photo sharing service, then you need to implement authorization to control, which users can see which other users' photos, right? And you need to enable your users to share photos with their friends and their family and so on. So there's all this kind of collaboration functionality that goes into consumer applications that boils down to authorization checks. Similarly, there's all kinds of concerns around privacy and so on that make up authorization functionality in the consumer space. In the B2B space, every single B2B application that goes to market has to enable administrators within the organizations that are using the software to control access, right? Like I might be an admin within, Salesforce, and I want to grant employees within my organization to see certain reports or do certain things within Salesforce. So I need to be able to do that within the application itself, right? So as an admin, I'm becoming kind of like an author of policy, effectively. And so this need for implementing authorization inside of SaaS applications is just pervasive, and we've seen a huge amount of interest from the OPA community around solving this with the technology. And there have been a lot of companies that have done it successfully. And what they've done, what we've seen them do, is build technology that solves a fairly tricky problem around data distribution with OPA in order to implement authorization. Because at the end of the day, you need to basically store, manage, and distribute the permission data for potentially, millions or tens or hundreds of millions of users, as well as hundreds of millions of resources that those users have access to. And so because OPA was not really designed for that kind of scale, it was intended to be this sort of host local agent that you could run in different places, and was designed around the idea of eventual consistency. It just wasn't really built for that. And so you have to do a lot on top of it if you want to leverage it. And so we saw this need from the community, and we had a lot of conversations with OPA users about how they were leveraging OPA for this application authorization problem. We figured that there was sort of a better way of delivering that. And so we're kind of taking on the burden of managing the data that powers authorization decisions now. So in addition to providing people with the kind of ability to offload authorization decision-making from an application, we can also offload the data management for those authorization decisions as well from the application. So it's really removing a bunch of the heavy lifting that we saw companies leveraging OPA doing when they built out an authorization solution on top of Open Policy Agent.
Sure. This is a great case study, right? In how software evolves and responds to the use cases that are presented, right? So CNCF and OPA, a lot of people immediately think of, I'm using OPA to manage my Kubernetes environments, right? Because I've got policies and it's an orchestrator, and it needs this policy management, and it's a great use case, correct? No one's saying boo, but this new use case, it's not a new use case, but this use case that you've just outlined that people are actually using it for, look, it's a whole new world at some level, right? It's a whole, same solution, different problem.
Yeah, and that's always been the vision behind Styra, right? Is to provide kind of like a unified solution to authorization across the stack. And so the way that we look at this is really just an extension to what we've already been doing, right? We've already been solving authorization within the infrastructure, within Kubernetes, within public cloud. We've been solving it within microservice environments. We've been solving it for access to internal resources by internal employees and so on. And this is really an extension of that story to help organizations solve authorization for their end users using OPA.
Love it.
Yeah.
All right. Hey, I need to turn to the business end of this a little bit, if it's okay with you, Torrin. So how is this packaged? How's it sold? What's the offering? Is it free? Is there a free version? What's the story?
Yeah, so this is sort of the first offering of its kind. It's a cloud hosted. You could almost think of it as OPA as a service, right? It's sort of like a hosted OPA offering that we run for you. And what we do is we take OPA and we run it in as many geographic regions as possible, so that it's as close to your application as possible, right? So that ideally it's running in the same availability zone in the cloud provider that you host your application inside of. Right, so we take that lifting and we run it for you, and so in order to make that available to people, they can sign up. It's sort of self-service, right? They can just kind of sign up. They can create a project and they can get started immediately, right? So today we're in private beta, so we're working with design partners around around early kind of adoption and use cases for it. But it's really intended to be kind of like a self-service journey that's targeted at developers, right? Individual developers or a team of developers that's tasked with implementing authorization. And so it's intended to be something that they can sign up for and very quickly see value inside of their own application, right? Like ideally they can take Styra Run and drop it into their application in a day or an afternoon and really cut down on the amount of kind of heavy lifting that developers have to do in order to secure applications and get them to market.
Got it. Excellent. Torrin, for people who maybe want to go check this out, you got a URL for them?
Yeah, for sure. We can share that with you offline, and then we can get it up with the talk. There's a sign up page that people can go to if they're interested in signing up to try it out. We ask for a few details about what their use case looks like, what kind of technology stack they're building their applications with, and then we'll be happy to get in touch and talk with them about it.
For people who are watching this now, maybe
who knows what device they're on. If they go to Styra, STYRA, is it .com?
That's right. Yeah.
Could they kind of follow the breadcrumbs to there?
I think so. Yeah, we can make sure they get a link as well.
Okay. Availability, is this GA'd right now or still?
Right now it's in private beta, and we're kind of working with some early design partners to make sure that it's satisfying like all the requirements. And then, in the near future, we'll be announcing the GA.
How near future? Not to put you on the spot.
I can't give you an exact date.
Year or?
Yeah, quite soon. Yeah, we're very happy with what we've currently got, and we just want to kind of make sure that it's satisfying, all the boxes that people have around some of the core initial use cases. There's a lot of different ways that you can think about solving authorization, and we're kind of targeting a couple initial ones, and then over time we'll expand them. And once we've nailed those initial ones, we'll be GAing.
Great. Hey, man, I want to thank you for coming on here and sharing this news with us. It is exciting.
Yeah, no, thanks a lot. Yeah, we're super excited. I think, in the same way that like sign-in with Google really changed the way that, application developers implement authentication inside of their applications and made it really kind of drop in. Styra Run's going to change the way that application developers implement authorization and control who can do what inside of their apps.
Check it out, Styra Run.
Thanks.
On Styra.com. Hey, Torrin, we'll see you again soon, I hope. If nothing else, maybe KubeCon Detroit or something.
For sure.
A couple months.
Okay.
All righty.
Thanks, Alan.
We're good.
Thank you. We're going to take a break here on Techstrong TV. We'll be back in a moment.
CISO Talk, to hear how real-world CISOs are dealing with today's real-world issues. From enabling secure remote workers to accelerating secure cloud adoption, defending against a pandemic of security attacks and beyond. CISO Talk covers the cyber topics you want to learn about. With your hosts, Unisys CISO Matt Newfield and MediaOps CEO Alan Schimmel, featuring a revolving panel of CISO cyber experts. This is where CISOs talk. Join us on digitalanarchist.com and techstrong.tv.
This is Techstrong TV.
All right, welcome back, everybody, to Techstrong TV live at RSA Conference here in San Francisco. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, and I am thrilled to be back here at this show live and in person. I can tell from a lot of conversations I'm having that a lot of other people are thrilled to be back in person as well. I have a conversation coming up now with Lou Crocker, who is the Director of Customer Engineering. Is that correct? Over at Digital AI?
Sales engineering,
Sales engineering, okay,
yep. Pre-sales and that type of thing.
Excellent,
Yep,
excellent.
Yep.
Digital AI.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about your company.
So Digital AI actually is an amalgamation of 5 companies that was brought together about a little over 2 years ago, with the intent of really bringing to the market something known as value stream management, which is one of those acronyms that everybody talks about.
I know the value stream management.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so we have agile planning, release and deploy, testing, and AI analytics, along with our security offering. The idea being really to overall answer the question to CEOs, CISOs, and all those people in the C-suite, what return is our investment bringing to us? It's been said, as I know you're aware, that every organization these days is a software company.
Right.
No, it doesn't matter what your actual business, what your actual value proposition is. Every organization is a software company. So you are, whether you're a retail store, whether you're something in security, whether you're something in development, no matter what you are a software development company. So how do you respond to the needs of the market, the needs of your customers, with new features and functions, etc.? Now, how do you measure that? How do you know if where you're placing your resources, that is to say, money and time and development resources, that type of thing, into delivering, like what you're delivering? What's the feedback? In essence, am I making more than I'm spending? Really, at the end of the day, that's the question that we're answering. Am I making more than I'm spending? And so the idea being that we brought together the agile planning aspect of it, which then flows into the release and deploy aspect of it. And then you have the testing, security, and then the analytics. The idea being to sort of create a symbiotic, loop, if you will, for the development of software, the instrumentation of new features and functions. Of course, as you do that, as customer experience has become, I would say, more important than security. Over the years, a decade ago or 15 years ago, you had what I refer to as request response experiences in a browser. That is to say that each experience on a browser page was a single view of an application. And there was not a lot of logic that was resident, because this is pre-mobile devices, of course. There was not a lot of logic that was resident in those applications in the browser. Of course, the problem is that was a very flat customer experience.
Yeah.
It really was not something that was extremely dynamic or responsive. And then and so that became important. And then on top of that, you have the proliferation of all these mobile devices where the customer experience is like, I have to have it like that, right? And so as that happened, more and more of the logic needed to be resident on the actual device that was in the customer's hands, whether that be a browser or a mobile device. And as that happened, more of the IP, more of the, for example, one of the biggest threats that we're seeing today is with the proliferation of of all the different mobile platforms, is threat actors are actually taking these applications, which do what your organization, what they make the money for your organization, whether it's a retail site or whatever it is, and they put more and more of the logic, more and more of the IP there. So these apps actually, as I say, we are in an increasingly API-centric world, right? Microservices and those types of things. So as the applications have to interact with more of these backend services, they require more API keys, they require more information about how to legally, if you will, penetrate the perimeter security. So what the threat actors are doing is they're taking apart these applications. They're looking inside. They're finding, endpoints. They're finding API keys. They're finding all kinds of different things. And so while you cannot not have perimeter security and behavioral modeling and those types of things, it's quite simply not enough anymore. And so what happens is you need to, in conjunction with that, instrument these applications with security techniques that will, for example, make sure that the app integrity is solid. Make sure that, for example, the environmental controls in the application, is it running on a rooted or jailbroken device, for example? Make sure that all those things can't be bypassed so that the threat actors are unable to legally penetrate the perimeter.
Okay. All right. So I find it kind of fascinating when we're talking about, you mentioned value stream management, and we're talking about, assigning value to security. And to me, that seems like a very difficult thing to do because, as we all know, if you don't have a data breach or some sort of security breach, that doesn't necessarily mean that your security technology investment is worth it. It's really bringing that value to the organization.
Right.
So how do you measure security from a value stream management perspective?
Well, I had two comments really. The first one is, the old insurance analogy, right? I mean, you pay for insurance, so you hope you never have to use it and that type of thing. And so that is there. But again, how do you know if you don't have a major accident with, if you don't run your, Mercedes into a Porsche, how do you know, if is my insurance enough? You don't, you don't know unless you actually do it, and you hope you never do it. The other thing that we're doing that is actually more prescriptive, is we're plugging into the analytics engine, monitoring. We have an entire monitoring toolkit, if you will, that will actually live in real time feed to a backend server the health of the application.
Okay.
And that is to say that if you have an application that sells clothes, for example, whatever, there's different places. There's the payment module, and there's the module that retrieves the type of clothes. There's the module that takes care of your account. They knows who you are, and all these types of different PII, if you will. And so those all get instrumented with protections, and then they also get instrumented with the ability to tell a remote server, are we healthy? Are we under attack? Are we not under attack? And it's actually very, very valuable to know, what is the thing? What is the first thing the threat actors are trying to do? Are they going, straight for the login bypass? Are they really trying to just penetrate to where, the financial payment system is? And so that actually, and in addition, it actually allows you to react to what you see. And so what we have noticed is that as we engage with new prospects, we actually, during we call it a technical evaluation, when we're engaging with a new prospect, we actually do this very thing. We instrument with this type of AI, and you'd be shocked that they say, wow, we didn't know that was happening. We didn't know that this was happening. And it really is able to demonstrate that value. Additionally, it also is able to, quite unintentionally perhaps, let the organizations know what parts of the application are being used.
Okay.
I mean, if you actually, if you have an organization, we get together as a development team, we think, we get feedback from the market, we think that the customers want the app to do this.
Yeah.
Then you can actually figure out, are the customers actually using that? Because not only does our tool tell you when the threat actors are attacking, it will tell you when they're not. So, but in telling you when they're not, it also tells you that the customers are using that. So there's a couple of different ways that we approach that.
That's great. That's great. And it's certainly a different way of approaching security.
Yes.
and putting that value to the security.
Absolutely.
So
yeah,
that's good stuff. So what are you guys seeing in kind of that whole DevSecOps space right now? Do you are you seeing that there are more organizations that are adopting DevSecOps and those principles behind application in development in their application development, or do you think that organizations are still kind of taking a kind of a piecemeal approach, if you will?
Well, we're seeing. I think the short answer to the question is we're in the stage where I think that more are realizing they need to adopt it. I think we've seen a little bit of, I don't know if it's resistance or just complacency in terms of because so many people have their CI/CD pipelines or dev pipelines already in place, already there. And there's a cost. I mean, there is a cost, whether that a combination of financial and well, it's all financial at the end of the day, but in terms of dev time, to integrate new tool sets. As more of the and this is where I think that the United States is a little bit behind because of the governmental regulations that have lagged a little bit behind. For example, Europe with GDPR, and they have to actually have like by law they have to have these things, and a law will really quickly force you to adopt something even if you don't want to, right? And so I think that we're seeing a little bit of that, but we're also seeing that the value of I really think that the insight that we are able to provide is starting to outweigh the cost of actually adoption, which of course is always the fight when you're talking with the C-levels and what's the cost, what's the value, that type of thing. And so I think that we're starting to see that the insight that we can provide is actually outweighing or value and making the value stronger than what the cost to adopt. So I think that people are doing that.
So do you think there's the reticence on behalf of the developers, those who are actually using the tool chain currently to learn a new technology, to kind of interrupt the flow, if you will, of their current tool chain, to add security into that process? Do you think that it's, they just don't want to have to deal with it? Or do you think, it's more like maybe a lack of understanding, if you will, about the, once they see what something like that can do for them, then they're more apt to, embrace the sec part of DevSecOps? Well, I think
I think probably there are as many different views on that as there are developers. But I think that in general, if I were to generalize, I would say that at the development level, and I am a developer, so I know the developers want to develop, right? They just want to, they don't really necessarily want anything that helps them do that. They want to do, and given the, certainly in the last 2 years, the proliferation of the need for pushing more experiences out there, because people are no longer coming into brick and mortar, right? Everything's online. Right. And so there's, in all fairness to all developers, there is a lot of pressure to get that feature function out the door. And it's more than the fact that they just don't see value in it. It's that they've got so much to do that even if they want to do that, how do you do that? How does a program manager get the time to implement that? So we have actually developed a number of ways that make it relatively, our tools are relatively seamless to the actual development process, which is very beneficial. And we've, with the, we've released over the last 6 months, some tools of a different tier of our product that's actually one step down from what we know as the premium product, which is completely configurable, to what we know as the pro product, which actually does some sort of, best practices analysis of your application and that type of thing. So, and then it instruments the security based on that, so that the developers really don't have to change in any way what they're doing. Okay. And we've always done that, but we're doing it to a much greater degree right now, as we're seeing part of the reticence is just time. Yeah. Yeah. It's a recurring conversation that I'm having. Time is the big roadblock these days. The big bottleneck is we just don't have enough time to do everything we need to do. So how can we get beyond that? Because obviously, we keep hearing the stats that there aren't enough security people. There'll never really be enough people to fill all of the security positions that are open. Same thing within the developer ranks. We're experiencing a huge dearth of qualified people in these spaces. Automation is helping a little bit, but obviously it is not the panacea, because we're still experiencing a lot of these issues. So what do you think is going to be the answer to this? Well, I think and it's probably not a very satisfying answer, but the answer really is value. When the value exceeds the value of something else in the value chain, it gets attention. Really what it is. We would all love to say that we are getting, that we're getting more developers, we're graduating more developers from college, which is not true. We are, we're seeing, more, people take up this or security or this type of thing. And while there are fantastic programs out there, there are fantastic, as you said, there are not enough. There just are not enough. And so what I think, really the answer is, as the value increases, whether that be through legislation, which we've seen in certain places, or whether that be through incidents, which we've seen in other places, or whether, quite frankly, if we make it easy enough, which we're trying to do, then that can sort of balance out the value argument and say, we see the value, this, that, and the other, then we can then, if it's easy enough to adopt, then, which we're trying to make that, then I think it becomes a really viable conversation.
All right. So what's next for you guys?
What's next for us? Well, we have recently adopted a sort of a 6-month type of platform, overall platform launch. We just went through one in April, known as the Ascension launch, which was essentially, early on, we're really bringing in and truing up the releases, the major releases of all the individual pieces of the value stream. As we go forward, we have another one in October.
Okay.
And as we go forward, what we're really looking to do is to increase the integration, particularly with those analytics I was discussing, and not only from a security perspective, but also from, as I was mentioning, the development insights perspective, and really potentially feeding all that information back around into and sort of, if you can picture a loop, really, back around into the Agile side, so that, for example, software defects can, if they're identified, can automatically be reported. We can automatically create features, stories that can then be pushed into the teams and then can be developed. So that's really what we're trying to do. We're trying to overall, attain the true meaning of value stream management, which which is it's kind of a North Star. It's kind of it's the goal that we're trying to go for. It's ambitious, and it does take time. I think we're getting there. We know where we're going. It's just a question of what's the next thing that we can do, and I think we've identified that, and we're working toward that next platform launch. And so some exciting things I think are coming.
All right, great. Well, Lou, thank you so much for taking the time, having the conversation with me. Always a pleasure.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Great. All right, everybody, we have got some lots more conversations, great conversations coming up. We're going to take a quick break, and we will be back in just a few minutes.
Hey everybody, happy Monday. Cody J. Brown here with some upcoming programs from Techstrong Learning. Now, all 3 of these programs are being held live tomorrow and are all hosted on DevOps.com. So first, at 11 a.m. Eastern, Precisely is hosting a program titled Bring Your Mission Critical Data to Your Cloud Apps and Analytics. This discussion is going to show you the next steps your team needs to make to integrate data efficiently and effectively. Next, at 1 p.m. Eastern, some of our friends at Fairwinds are joining us to show some mistakes you're probably making in Kubernetes. This discussion is led by 2 former SREs who have spent years preventing mistakes in Kubernetes. And our final program on Monday will begin at 4 p.m. Eastern. Stormforge has assembled a panel titled Taking Your SRE Team to the Next Level. Join some of the industry's leading SRE experts to learn some industry-proven best practices to drive up availability. So that's all I've got for you today, but we do have plenty of upcoming and on-demand programs for you here at Techstrong Learning.
The Engineering the Change Scholarship Program offers a life-changing opportunity for a winner from an underrepresented community to change their lives by becoming a full-stack software developer.
The background that you might see that it's a weakness, it's a strength in this field because everyone is constantly looking for people that are going to bring new ideas.
It's an intense 12-week course that is not for the timid.
For real, who's mastering this right now? Because I sure am not.
So you guys are badass. Like as a class, you guys are crushing it.
You've got to be dedicated. You've got to be ready to do it. Your life has to be ready for it. Follow us as we go through this cohort's Engineering the Change winner on their journey to becoming full-stack engineers.
Welcome! Say with great power comes great responsibility.
We got to take it down to 3 finalists. Toria, I'm going to ask you, who really kind of stood out for you?
The 3 people that stood out to me the most was Stephanie and another woman named Carly and a man named Donald.
Mitchell, what do you think?
Yeah, I think I agree. Actually, I think those are 3 great candidates, and I mean, you know very well, right, what it takes to go through this process.
Look, I still love good written and oral skills. I like people who can speak well. I like people who really can write well.
Right.
And I'm going to tell you something. To your point about Stephanie, is it Stephanie Sanchez? Yeah, Stephanie Sanchez. Her essay was one of the best essays I've ever read in the 3 or 4 times we've done this.
Yeah.
Okay.
And bring her into
the golden
finals.
buzzer. Right?
So,
she's in.
Yeah. The 2 other people you mentioned, to me, Carly epitomizes why we do this.
Yeah.
She said something like, her brothers could do it, why couldn't she? Mm-hmm. Right? Wasn't that in the essay?
Yeah. That's something that stuck with me, especially as a woman.
Yeah.
Because I think that for her, she was like, if they can do it and there's not enough women in tech, like she was like, I can do it too. And I love that.
I say send Carly to Hollywood.
Golden buzzer?
Yeah. Donald Bazell, really nice guy. What I liked about his essay is his genuineness. Is that a word?
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
being genuine.
He's genuine.
Yeah.
Right? You got it from him. My only caveat on this is he really doesn't have any tech experience.
Yeah.
So if it's your vote and Mitchell, you don't object, I say let's give Donald the last ticket to Hollywood. And those are our 3 finalists for Engineering the Change. Let's bring them in for interviews and pick our winner.
Okay.
Sounds fun.
Sounds
All
good.
right. We'll see you on the next show.
DevOps.com is the #1 online destination for DevOps education and community building. DevOps.com covers all aspects of DevOps, including DevOps best practices and tools, DevOps culture, DevSecOps, business impact, continuous testing, continuous delivery, and more. DevOps.com has the largest collection of original DevOps content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.devops.com to learn more. DevOps.com, where the world meets DevOps.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Well, I have the great pleasure of being joined by Stephen Chen with JFrog. Steve, good to be talking with you today.
Cool. No, this is awesome to be interviewing and actually be interviewing in person because we've been on panels and.
What is that? You mean you're not Zoom? Oh, okay.
Doing all this stuff over Zoom. So this is amazing.
It is. It's great to be in person with you again. For folks who don't know about JFrog, I can't imagine there are a few people maybe that don't. Tell us about JFrog and your role there, and then we want to get into some really cool news.
Yeah, so I'm the VP of Developer Relations at JFrog. For those who haven't heard of JFrog, we're the binary company. We deal with package management, security, deployment for all of your Docker containers, different package types, over 30 different package types now Artifactory supports for the ecosystem. And I've just been having a blast at JFrog because I love the founding team, I love the technology we build, and I love the fact that we support and develop a bunch of interesting open source projects.
Artifactory was kind of my introduction into DevOps way back when DevOps was just kind of DevOps, but good stuff. Well, let's talk about it. You have some really exciting news on the security, supply chain, software supply chain security, and maybe some open source work.
Yeah, so we just announced a new open source project, which we're doing in collaboration with Docker, with Deploy Hub, with FutureWay, with Huawei, and with some other companies. And this is our view for what developers, DevOps, and the entire DevOps ecosystem needs to secure the open source supply chain in the future. And I think we've seen over the past year just an increasing number of supply chain security attacks. At JFrog, we've seen our security research team is really, really good, and they keep finding targeted exploits, leveraging dependency injection attacks, namespace confusion, or even malware that's in all the public repositories, which we depend on as developers, and it's really a challenging state of affairs when companies are better funded to protect themselves against and do proper security defenses than the open source projects they depend upon. So the attackers have realized if I can't go in the front door, guess what? There's people with trucks that are shipping in food and supplies in the back, and I'm just gonna like put little viruses and
hijack
things.
Our way in, right?
Hijack through the food services or whoever else is going through the back door, and unfortunately, open source is currently that vector. So we want to be part of the solution for fundamentally solving supply chain security.
Well, it's interesting, a year ago, it's not like supply chain security for software is a new issue, or there haven't been exploits or have, but I think with some of the open source Log4j, for example, that has made, the more public, the wider spread of the impact, now all of a sudden it's on everybody's radar, including the attackers.
No, the way I like to put it is a lot of the stuff that we do as like DevOps experts, you can't go home and tell your parents or grandparents about it.
That's what I did today.
They're like, well, what do you mean you just installed like a new CI/CD tool? Like, what's CI/CD? But if you tell them that you fixed the Log4j vulnerability for your company, they're like, oh yeah, I saw that in the news.
I don't know what it is, but I heard about it.
So now our jobs
papers.
Suddenly our parents and everyone else actually knows what we do for a living.
Maybe your parents, but okay. Yeah, that's a different topic. Well, so talk about this as, and now you're introducing this as an open source project, but you're also looking to get adopted, right?
Yeah, so basically what Persia is it's a decentralized package manager where multiple companies are running infrastructure that supports a wide-scale peer-to-peer network. So we're leveraging libp2p, which is the same underlying library that IPFS uses, which is kind of the next generation Web 3.0 technology. We're also building it with a transparency ledger. So it's an immutable history of everything which goes into the network so that you have that auditability. You can build SBOMs so that you have security traceability of where all your dependencies are coming from, and it can't be tampered with. So this
you do
means
it a blockchain style, or
exactly. So new transactions only get committed if you get a majority of the companies using a BFT or Byzantium fault-tolerant algorithm for the companies with authorized nodes. And this means that it gives you an even higher level of security than, for example, depending upon a central registry where one company backs it or there's a single instance. Because now an effective attack against the network means you'd have to take down over a third of the nodes in the network, which is technically infeasible if it's a good architecture, if the companies running it have good security standards.
A much bigger bar, a higher bar to meet.
Exactly.
To bring
and
it down.
I think if you look at the sort of infrastructure we have in our companies and which support our enterprises, we put a lot of investment and a lot of technology behind it. Open source doesn't get the same love. I mean, we should, as open source developers, you should have secure infrastructure. It should build your software in a way which is reproducible and can be verified across the network. It should be a distribution system which is fault tolerance, peer-to-peer enabled, so it doesn't go down, so you don't have outages. And you should just be able to rely on a high level of security from the network, where whatever you pull down as a package or a binary is exactly what you would build yourself from source.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. So why this approach and why now? Was it inspired by things that are happening over the last few years? This is an idea that's been cooking? Is it the research and what you're seeing for the kind of attacks that are on the rise?
So I think that the reason for why now is security. We're also going to be donating this to the OpenSSF Foundation, which is a foundation focused on open source supply chain security. And I think when you look at the criticality of open source infrastructure for the entire ecosystem, we both need to fix what we have today. So we're supporting and doing a bunch of improvements to our own central repository, Conan Center, for the C and C++ community, for the OpenSSF efforts on securing other repositories, on having volunteer folks to help open source projects improve, dashboards and security researchers for fixing this, but also looking at what's the next generation infrastructure, which is going to support open source communities to have a distributed, peer-to-peer, secure, decentralized way of distributing open source software. And we think Persea is the answer to that in the future. This will be the next generation technology that helps open source developers secure themselves in a scalable way.
And I made this mistake. It's not Persea, it's Persea, which tells the origins of the name.
Yeah. So Persea is a reference to the Greek system for communicating over long distances. So per for pyro, and they had torches, so they would have an array of two arrays of 5 torches, so 10 torches total on a mountaintop. And then they would communicate using the Greek alphabet with a 5x5 grid, so they would know what letter they were sending. And if you think about it, this was a large-scale distributed communication system in the Greek Empire, and I think this is kind of the same leap we need to make technologically to secure open source software in an open, transparent, scalable way, backed by companies like JFrog who care about the community and the ecosystem and want to make a more secure, developer-friendly environment for us all to build our next generation pipelines in.
I get JFrog, you mentioned Deploy Hub, I think is one of the contributors. But you also mentioned Huawei, and that brings up a couple of questions that I wonder about. First of all, as one of the major equipment suppliers, technology suppliers into networks and all kinds of technologies across the world, the integrity of that obviously has got to be very high. Also, being a Chinese company, that brings, of course, some nation states are favorable or not favorable to adopting technology. And I know you can't speak for them, I'm not asking you to, but it seems like this might also help to some degree of we're not putting our own backdoors in our code, that kind of thing.
Yeah, so I think one of the things we're doing with the project is we're building it as a pure open source project. So there's an open source repo on GitHub, so github.com/Persia. The website's open source, all of the IP and everything we're contributing to OpenSSF, and I think that it shows a huge level of support that we have companies like Docker. Our first target is doing the best support for the container native ecosystem, so the fact that they're coming on board, they're supporting with their Docker certified images with integration with the Docker command line and building that tight integration is huge. And FutureWay and Huawei are jumping in, and they actually have some really interesting technology to support secure Docker containers where they're entirely isolated from the host environment. And this allows you to securely build the images in network such that it's impossible for viruses or the host machine tampering to affect the output result of what you're getting on the network. So it adds an extra level of security on the builds which you're receiving from the Persia network. So I think that this is something we all need to contribute in to improve the state of open source supply chain security. There's a bunch of bleeding edge technologies which we can and should be leveraging to take advantage of this. And with the support of all the companies I mentioned and more who are interested, I think that we can kind of shift where we have the technical advantage over the hackers and the attackers in the network, where it's just as hard to attack the open source supply chain as it is to attack any large scale corporate network.
Mm-hmm. And I think what you mentioned too about that of being able to trust the information that you're getting from that not being compromised by the environment that might also itself have been compromised.
Exactly.
That's a huge benefit right there, because now you know you're getting accurate, trusted information, not everything is suspect because of one thing being suspect. Mm-hmm. So, well, Steve, great stuff. I'm excited to see where Persia goes and its adoption, and Docker and Deploy Hub and Huawei, and I mean the companies you've got working with you, JFrog. It's fantastic. Sounds like you've lined up some good players to be part of this community.
Yeah, no, very excited about the announcement, and it's been great chatting with you. I mean, this is awesome.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. Thanks for joining us today on Techstrong TV. We look forward to the next time you are with us.
Looking for a live conference focused on the tools, technologies, and practices most important to your business? Innotech conferences are live one-day business and technology conferences highlighting the latest in trends for IT leaders, developers, and IT professionals. Each event combines education, innovation, peer-to-peer networking, and the latest technology and business solutions for a diverse IT-focused audience. Innotech conferences occur throughout the year in strategic regional locations, bringing together technology professionals from various industries to learn about the solutions, practices, and tools impacting their day-to-day work and gain insight into what's to come. Presenters at Innotech conferences are selected and curated to ensure each session provides the most up-to-date and relevant information without any hype. Whether you're interested in digital transformation, cybersecurity, cloud, IT leadership, or DevOps, Innotech conferences deliver. 2022 events are scheduled to be held in Austin, Dallas, Oklahoma City, Houston, and Washington, D.C. Innotech conferences are produced by Techstrong Live and powered by Techstrong Group.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey guys, thanks for the throw. We're here with Michael Tal, who is technical director for Vorturo, and they do a lot of stuff in the realm of zero trust and content, and we'll get into that in a minute. But right now, we're going to talk about healthcare and the attacks against those types of organizations. Michael, welcome to the show.
Hey, Mike. Thank you for having me. It's great being here.
We've seen an increase in the rate at which attacks are being launched against healthcare organizations in particular. They're not necessarily new ideas in any shape, manner, or form, but we're seeing more of them. And I'm just curious, at this juncture, why are we seeing more of that now than we were earlier, even though we all know that these are high-value targets?
Sure. So it's quite interesting because many think that healthcare organizations should be last on the list for cyber criminals attacks, but the reality shows that there are no exception for threat actors when they are trying to gain profit. So, of course, infiltrating healthcare are no, they are no strange for cyber criminals attack. One of the things that I personally think that got the increase in cyber criminals attack against healthcare organizations is the fact that, or is a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. Of course, COVID-19 introduced the risk factor for healthcare, including the remote workforce, the new system that they need to be supported, and some of the staffing challenges. So all of the above, I think that caused also the increase on the cyber criminals around the healthcare organization.
Are the records that they're going after more valuable than most other records? Because it seems like it's going to also include people's medical information. And as the competition in that space increases, they're probably just going, hey, all those other records aren't as valuable as they used to be. So more of them are focused on healthcare records.
Right. I agree that most of the time, the asset of the patients and the medical information that these organizations hold is the most important thing, and the threat actors trying to expose and try to get control over this important information. And of course, that value that has on the black market is highly valuable. So therefore, they're trying to put their hands on that important information. It goes without saying, of course, with the threat actors try to also take over some of the healthcare machines. For instance, the ventilator machines. We heard about an attack that one group eliminated the ventilator machine and caused a life-threatening situation in a hospital. So these are just more of the things that they're trying to expose or to compromise when they are taking over those threats that they are looking to expose.
The attacks themselves are also not limited to the physical premises of the healthcare organization anymore. It seems like there's more telemedicine, there's more remote, doctor in a box type of places that we see here in the US all the time where there are little retail outlets. So has the attack surface for these organizations expanded beyond their ability right now to cope with?
Absolutely. I think that, due to the situation where there was an increase in remote workforce, so some of the system were not just on the on-premises data centers, they also needed or required to move into the cloud. So some of these processes were digitized, and, they are new. Right now, or not new, but more option for the threat actor to try to invade and maybe to get themselves inside those digital processes, and also to find some way to insert themselves and to get control over that sensitive data that they are looking to get control.
So we are hearing a lot more about zero trust, and it's not clear to me that people understand exactly what's involved in that, because, conceptually, they'll get the idea in a second, but it's not like I roll out of bed in the morning and go, let me go buy some zero trust. There's a lot of stuff I got to get and bring together. So where are we in terms of zero trust, and what should people be thinking about?
So, in my opinion, zero trust is, a framework that more and more organizations are adopting nowadays. And most of what we're seeing, at least in my company, is the requirement and the need to secure the content that the organization is dealing with. So healthcare, along with other organizations, adopting the zero trust when they are interacting with content. right? So we spoke a little bit about the digital processes that are moving now, not just from the on-premises data centers, but also move to the cloud. And they know they need to secure those areas as well. So it's not just you're getting an email with a malicious file in it. It's also the requirement and need to secure those collaboration tool that are publicly exposed to anyone. Or, for instance, if we're talking about a portal that that a medical clinic has to serve their end clients or patients in order to upload some medical documents. So these are also weak points for the hackers to try and maybe upload a malicious content to those portals where their patients, their end clients are interacting with. So the thinking around, securing content and not trust any file or content that may leave your organization or you may receive from an external source. This is where we're seeing at least the need to reconstruct or to sanitize everything that you're interacting with in terms of content.
How do I go about securing content? People understand data and they understand networks, but what exactly is content and how do I secure it?
Perfect. So today, when we're talking about content, it's not just the importance of making sure that it arrives securely within your network by leveraging, the SSL, TLS methods, and not just the method to encrypt it when the data is at rest, but it's also to ensure that the data that you receive from any source is completely secure and you're able to open that file. You are able to interact with that document securely without the need to think twice whether that that email or that file came with any kind of malicious content in it. So again, the zero trust strategy in especially in the CDR space, which stands for content disarm and reconstruction, is to basically reconstruct every file that you're interacting with. And by leveraging that technology, you're simply looking at only the known good content of the file, of the content itself, rather than just being depending on traditional security mechanisms such as AVs or other scanning tools. Because today we're seeing the fact that ransomwares and groups, the threat actors groups are evolving. So today is not just banking Trojans that are spread around. These are collaborating groups that working together to evolve those platforms. And the ransomware and those malicious malwares keep evolving every single day. So we need to keep with that same pace. And we learned that being dependent on traditional security mechanism is not the way to ensure that the organization is secured. The way around would be to concentrate on the good content from the file and then deliver only the safe content to the end user while leaving behind everything which is unknown or potentially bad content.
Do you think the bad guys are getting better at inserting themselves into processes and they're not just doing a smash and grab these days? They're the breaches themselves, they're hanging around longer to see how things work and inserting themselves into the workflows.
Absolutely. I think also, the threat actors, the security company on the one hand try to keep up with the pace and always developing new technology. But on the other hand, the threat actors always keep evolving, and they are also looking at some smart and sneaky ways to get inside of an email thread. For instance, we're seeing, threat actors that are stealing legitimate email addresses, and then by inserting themselves to a legitimate correspondence between two parties, they can easily have that, the trust that they need to have between those two parties in compared to someone, just trying to leverage a Gmail or a Hotmail mail address that would maybe look suspicious to someone that interacts with that email. But when they hijacks a legitimate email, and then by leveraging that legitimate email address, they will try to insert a weaponized file most of the time that will embed some malicious code inside this file. This is the way that they're trying to, get over, or they try to insert themselves within the security solution that the organization leverage at the moment.
Do you think most healthcare organizations are up to the challenge? Because for every one huge hospital chain, it seems like there's thousands of little healthcare providers out there that have all this data, and the bad guys are just as easily go after them as they would the big healthcare organization that has lots of security.
Right. So I think that's a really good point, because most of the healthcare organization, especially when we're talking about the public sector, these specifically stating the hospitals are sometimes they have budget constraints, so they're not leveraging they're not especially leveraging the latest technology, and this can be a weak point for the threat actor. But that again doesn't say that the threat actors will not try to invade or to compromise also a large healthcare which may or may not have the latest technology. So I believe what will continue drive the threat actors group is the fact they would like to have their hands on the sensitive data. So that's first of all, that will be the main chase, and they will try to at some point to get inside one of these sectors or one of these organizations. And it won't be a matter of having the latest technology or having the existing security mechanism, but just whether the threat actor will go after the sensitive data.
It seems like we are heavily concerned about ransomware as always, but are these attacks changing in nature, going beyond ransomware, and people need to think more aggressively about just what it is these folks are up to?
Sure. So this is today, I could say, and it's related to something that we touched a little bit before. But today, those ransomware or those malwares, they keep evolving, because they're not just Trojans. They're not just Trojans that try to get the data from you once you're clicking a malicious link. This is a whole platform. So whenever you're getting an email, for instance, that has an attachment, and that attachment can be, let's say, a Word document, and for instance, the Word document has a macro embedded in it. So that macro can initiate a malicious code on your machine. But what we're seeing today is that most of these attacks, the way they are evolved is that the malicious code will not run as soon as you will open that Word document or that PDF file that you're getting from someone. That would be a multi-stage kind of attack. When you first open the first document, that first document will run another process, and that process will in some cases will open another document, and that the second document that opens, it will try to interact with an external source, and that external source still can be a benign source. But from that point where the benign host can serve a payload that will then download to your machine, and this is where the things getting more and more dangerous, because the payload that downloads to your machine, this is when the actual processes start to run on your system, and this is where the interaction with the hard disk in some cases is getting into the fact that it will download the final payload on your machine. So those kind of multi-stages attacks that we're seeing always keep evolving, and it's not just the easiest way to just open a document and get attacked, but having a multi-stage kind of attack that will at some point will run the end or the final malware on your machine, and will have and will let the group or the attacker get control over your files and maybe do some lateral movement into your network and gain the assets that they would like to have.
Do you think we're in danger of some sort of backlash against digitization of healthcare because of these attacks, or will we just kind of keep plowing ahead regardless?
So I definitely think there's a concern around those kind of digital processes, mainly because of the fact that today, at least as we are seeing the market, the security around those tools are specifically with enabling multi-factor authentication as the user log into the platform, and sometimes again to make sure that we're securely uploading the files into those tools the data will be encrypted in flight, and also of course maintaining the data at rest to be encrypted. But it's not just that, because again, when we're talking about a possible malware that can be hidden inside a file that stays in those collaboration tools, whenever someone will try to download or will interact with that file, this is where it gets more complicated. So also the platform, the digital processes should be also secured with enhanced mechanism in order to ensure that they also protecting the data itself, not just with the common methods that we're seeing in the market.
All right, folks, you heard it here first. The healthcare guys are far from out of the woods yet, and there might be more trouble coming than they can handle, but we'll see what happens from here, and hopefully everybody will do the right thing. Hey, Michael, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you very much, Mike, for having me. It's great being here today again. Thank you very much.
All right, guys, back to you in the studio.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey guys, thanks for the throw. We're here with Sonali Shah, who's Chief Security Strategist for Invicti. They are a provider of tools, platform services, and all that good stuff for securing web applications. And they have issued a new report on what's going on with security in the federal government. Sonali, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
So this report you guys published, what are some of the high points? I mean, there's a lot of awareness these days of web application security issues in the government post the Biden administration issuing an executive order. But what exactly is the challenge? What did you guys see in your report?
Yeah, maybe let me back up a bit and just give some context as to why we did this report, because I think that'll provide some good sort of overview of the problem that we're facing. So, as you mentioned, Invicti is a leader in the web application security space. We've been in business for over 15 years, and we have over 3,500 customers. A large chunk of them are in the government sector. And what we have seen both in the public and private sector is, while cybersecurity in general has been a key topic for a while now, in particularly recently, there has been an increased focus on application security, and in particular, securing web applications from the time that they're developed all the way to production. Now, when we talk to our customers in the federal, local governments, we often hear of challenges, right? This is a difficult thing to do. Security can sometimes slow down development. There's a shortage of cybersecurity professionals. And so as we get more and more customers in the space, we are always talking to customers to understand what should our roadmap be and what are the key areas that we can improve to help them. And so that was the context behind this study. So we worked with Meritech and interviewed 160 federal cybersecurity leaders, evenly split between defense and civilian agencies, to understand how big of a challenge is this for them, and kind of where are the key areas where we can help them. So just kind of high level snapshot, what we learned is 76% of the respondents said that application security is a critical part of national security. And 88% of them experienced a breach via a web application in the past year. That's really high. It mirrors what we've been seeing, like this trend, but 86% is even higher than what you would see with, say, Verizon. They release this data breach and incidents response report, the Verizon DBIR, every year. And what they say, and now they're looking across all sectors, not just government, that 70% of all incidents and 40% of all breaches stem from attacks on web applications. So we see this is, in the government sector, it's even more pronounced.
Is it your sense that the folks in the government are not quite as mature in their practices as the private sector? Or are they roughly equal? It's just that there's more attention being paid because of the Biden order, and these folks are just as smart as anybody else. They just have the same issues, maybe in a more public forum.
That's exactly it, right? I think whether it's public sector, private sector, they're all facing the exact same challenge. So today, whether it's, again, government or federal or state, local, or even private sector enterprises, web applications are the primary way that people are doing business, communicating with employees, with customers, with partners. There's over 2 billion web applications in existence today and growing by the minute, right? So this is a relatively new area for enterprises to focus on. And I would say that the folks we've met in the government sector are just as savvy as those in large private organizations, but they're all facing the same issue. And it's even worse, I feel, with the government sector, because there is all of this. First of all, they're protecting some of the most valuable assets, right? And the other thing is they're a number one attack vector. If you look at all the industries across the board that are attacked, the government is the most high profile. So I think they're facing the exact same issues. It's just they're getting a lot more attention right now.
What exactly are some of the technical challenges that people are encountering? Because on the face of it, it sounds pretty simple. If you're your average business or maybe even IT leader, you're like, okay, we need to lock down and secure the way we build these applications. And then when they're deployed, we need to secure them better than we have been. It should be relatively straightforward. And yet, I feel like, somebody comes down and they have the little sermon on DevSecOps, and then everybody goes back to business as usual. So what is the real challenge?
It's just hard to do. It's just period. It sounds easy. Cybersecurity is just hard to do because the attacker, it will just take them minutes to go in and get sensitive data. Whereas, if you look at some of the industry stats out there, it can take months to years to even for us to even identify that a breach has occurred. And then attribution also is very hard. So it's just that it's difficult to do. So now the next question is, why is it difficult to do? Well, it requires, so you mentioned DevSecOps, right? So that's the way that everyone's looking at attacking this problem. And for some of your viewers who may not be familiar with it, it's really just, DevSecOps is really just embedding security into the software development lifecycle very early on. So from coding and testing and QA and then regularly scanning in production. But this is a change from the way software's been traditionally done. So you need a different set of skills. I mean, most developers today, they may graduate with a degree in, engineering, but they haven't been taught how to code securely. It's not part of their requirements. So I think it's the skills, and it's a different way of doing things, and it's a different, it's a different culture, and that takes time to change.
Is it really an effort to educate the developers, many of whom I think, their only exposure, to your point, was an elective in college somewhere about cybersecurity, and it wasn't a requirement, so most of them probably didn't do it. Or is it more about automating the pipelines and the processes and putting the security checks in the pipelines? Because it seems like asking the developers to become security experts may be a big ask.
It is. It absolutely is. And I would say it's both, and I would add a third thing. So first of all, the mandate for cybersecurity has to come top down. And that's already happened with the government, right? But it's got to be within the departments. It has to be something that becomes part of the check before anything is released. Has the application been scanned? How many high severity vulnerabilities are there? What has been fixed? So today, when you're a developer, you've got, your quarterly objectives and goals. It's usually build this feature that does X, Y, and Z, release it on time. And there are quality checks that have to be passed. Rarely do you see in the objectives, and it should be released without vulnerabilities or without, high severity vulnerabilities, whatever the criteria may be. So I think it has to be built into the culture of it in terms of how a developer views his or her job and how they're evaluated on their job. That's one piece of it. Another one is exactly, as you said, providing training. And that's where, there's a bunch of online courses that can be done. You can do security champions programs that have worked, that we've seen in many clients. And then the last part, as you mentioned, is the automation. Because if it's very manual, then it's a matter of training the developers on security, but also then it taking a whole bunch of time away from their core competency, which is writing good code. So you're absolutely right. You've got to automate it so that testing occurs within the software development lifecycle automatically, and the results go into the developer's environment, whether it's Jira or ServiceNow or whatever they're using, so that they can action on them quickly and in an automated fashion.
You can't really talk about automation these days without bringing up AI. And I guess my question is, can AI save us from ourselves someday, or is that just wishful thinking?
I hope it will, but for now, I think it's wishful thinking. I think a lot of security companies, including ourselves, are looking at, I think what is not wishful thinking is looking at historical data and how we can improve. And that involves some machine learning. I know it's a big buzzword, machine ML, AI. I think the real AI is not there yet, but I think there is quite a bit that we can learn from data, particularly in helping us prioritize what to fix first. Because I think that's a big issue that everybody deals with, right? You get thousands of alerts from all of your various security systems. How do you prioritize what really matters? And I think that's where machine learning can certainly help.
What's the one thing you kind of wish most organizations would focus on, or you just shake your head and you see over and over again, can't believe that we're still wrestling with these issues? And it seems to me, at least, a lot of the attack vectors are, been known for better part of a decade, but, why are we still tripping over the same issues over and over again?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, you look at cross-site scripting, SQL injections, like they're the same attacks that have been occurring for years, and they're still the most popular ones. Look, to be fair, there's a lot that's the same, but there's also a lot that's changed. So the attack surface has increased, first of all. And then the the motivations and the way attackers work is constantly evolving. So as soon as we can't just say, all right, here's the one way into this application and this is what we should look for. The hackers are getting more and more sophisticated, and they only have to be right once, right? Whereas on the opposite side, the security professionals have to be right 100% of the time to not be breached. So I don't want to make light of the problem by saying that it's the same stuff over and over again. Some of it is, but there is a lot of changes happening, and particularly when you look at like what's happening right now with Russia and Ukraine, the cyber war started even before the physical war. And there is an example of, you were saying, well, why don't people get this? Well, companies that refuse to do business with Russia, many of them were attacked. And they might even be small companies that don't even have sophisticated cybersecurity teams. So I think that most companies just aren't equipped for it. And they didn't think they would be attacked, right? It was usually the large banks and the healthcare systems that thought, okay, we need to protect ourselves from this. But now it's schools, police forces that are being faced with ransomware. It's the supplier that is no longer going to do business with the Russian government that is being attacked. So the problem has become, I think, more pervasive, and the attack surface has gotten larger.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that we are developing software too fast and we need to slow down, or can we keep the pace that we're on and just make it more secure?
Anybody who tells you that security adds no overhead is lying. Like, that's just not possible, right? I mean, you think of TSA, right? It's going to add time, even if you have pre-check, right? It takes time. Good security takes time. So we can absolutely continue innovating. We can absolutely continue releasing software multiple times a day. It's all about what you had said earlier, automation. And I would say accuracy is the other piece of it. Because if you automate everything, but your results aren't accurate, it's like garbage in, garbage out, right? You want to make sure that the results that get to the developers are accurate and actionable so they can quickly remediate, so that you minimize the amount of time they spend on security. And I think that's absolutely possible to do with, if you've got scans that are taking minutes, developers can immediately get the feedback and test and fix before they remediate. So it is possible, but I wouldn't say that it will ever get to the point where it's zero overhead.
All right. Well, folks, I would just say, let's have a little empathy for our federal friends there. They're dealing with the same issues we all are, except probably getting paid less for it. So, hey, Sonali, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you for having me. It was a great discussion.
All right. Back to you guys in the studio.
ContainerJournal.com is the leading online destination for centralized computing-related content. ContainerJournal.com covers all aspects of software containers, from container management, data management for containers, container security, networking for containers, to the entire container ecosystem, Kubernetes, microservices, serverless, and more. ContainerJournal.com has the largest selection of container-related news, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.containerjournal.com to learn more.
This is Techstrong TV.
All right. Well, hey, we're live back here again at Cyber World here at RSA 2022. We're in Moscone West. We had the usual someone here from San Francisco on a loudspeaker cursing outside. They've removed that person. Otherwise, it's actually pretty quiet here right now. I think a lot of people are in sessions or maybe down on the expo floor. I want to introduce you to my guest, Teresa Lee.
Yes.
She's with Cowbell. Who is Cowbell, you ask? Well, let's ask Teresa.
Thanks, Anna. My name is Teresa Lee. I'm the head of claims and risk engineer at Cowbell. And we are a cyber insurer for small to medium-sized businesses. So cyber coverage for businesses that have that need cyber coverage. And in today's environment, it's increasingly becoming a contract provision. What business does not have an internet-facing presence, customer data? So it's small to medium-sized businesses are in great need of cyber insurance.
All businesses are in great need of cyber insurance, but certainly the SMB is an underserved market. So, look, we were talking, Teresa and I were talking off camera, right? And I don't know about you out there, but if any of you have, own companies, operate companies, help operate companies, we get cyber insurance offered to us as part of our general liability coverage. Our broker says, should we put a rider on for cyber? And I will tell you, and full disclosure, Teresa, in front of you, up until maybe 2 years ago, the advice from the insurance broker is, look, we're going to offer it to you, but we don't really see a lot of value because A, of the cost, B, what it actually covers, etc. Now, the rise of ransomware, I think, has changed that game, right? And so now they're telling you, yeah, maybe you should get it. But at the same time, they caution you, read your policy to understand what is covered in ransomware, right? Well, what is covered in ransomware insurance?
Yes.
We know what ransomware does.
That's right.
But so, because a lot of people, unfortunately, and this is, I guess, your life these days, right? A lot of people pay for insurance, think they have coverage, and then, boom, an incident happens. They don't know how to deal with that. And they either, like, one of three things happens. Either they find out the coverage they thought they had really doesn't cover what they had. B, they kind of voided their policy or voided their coverage because the way they responded was just totally wrong. They didn't notify, they used outside vendors, whatever. And any coverage they did have, any benefits they had, they lost. Or three, they actually get covered, right? Yeah. And they would make a successful claim. I don't even want to guess what the different percentages are. But this is your life. How does it work?
And there's been such a development in cyber insurance in the last 2 years. And a lot of that is driven by the proliferation, frequency, and severity of ransomware.
Yep.
And it's targeting not just the Fortune 500 companies, it's the whole swath. And that's why companies small to medium-sized do need this coverage to protect them, because they may not make it through a cyber event otherwise, because these are very expensive. And so my life every day is when a claim comes, when it arises. So this means a policyholder has had a hacking incident, a ransomware. Maybe they miswired money because they were a victim of social engineering, a phishing incident.
Yep.
And so it's not lost on me that when I get that call, when I get that email from a policyholder, from a broker saying, oh my gosh, something's happened, but we can't operate. Our systems are down. Our email is gobbledygook. It's not lost to me that that's probably the worst professional day for them. It's really alarming. It's very stressful, and they don't know what to do. The first thing always, if you have a cyber policy, is to notify your cyber insurer. It should be the first thing for a couple of good reasons. First of all, we do this every day. While it's your worst day and your worst case scenario, for us on the cyber insurance side, this is the product at work. This is why we're here. This is our everyday scenario. So we know what to do, and we'll help you. And part of that is right away, we'll get the resources that you'll need depending on the incident. So if it's a ransomware, we'll triage that. We'll see what kind of threat actor group it is, how your operations are, what kind of cyber architecture you have. And we'll get the forensics as well as the breach counsel in right away to triage and to help guide the next steps. We have preferred vendor panels. So you spoke about, do I Google who's going to help me with a ransomware negotiation? No, don't do that. Tell your cyber insurer, we have experts on hand, ransom negotiators. We have forensic investigation. We have PR firms. This is all part of the coverage by and large. We have recovery experts that can help you get up and running, operational. And we do want to mitigate the exposure. And some of that is quick reaction, the right
and also
resource.
experience in the area, right? Because a lot of people,
the first time when they get ransomware, just the first time.
It's very shocking.
Right?
It feels very vulnerable.
It absolutely
you think you're going to that's the last day of your business.
Violation, absolutely.
Exactly.
And here's the thing, in listening to you, Teresa, I want to emphasize this to our audience. When you have life insurance, they don't bring the dead person back to life.
No.
They write you a check. That's what life insurance is. You die, your loved ones, your beneficiaries, whoever, they get a check.
Yeah.
When you have car insurance, someone sues you, your liability insurance defends and covers you. You get damage to your car, your insurance company writes you a check to fix the car. Sometimes they'll actually bring you to their own body shop or approved body shop to do the work to make sure it's done well. When we're talking about cyber insurance, it's not just writing a check.
No.
Right? Because I can't write a check for your business going out of business. It is truly about helping you.
It's about all the
recover.
resources. Yes.
Right.
Yes. And those are the goals. We want the business to recover. And so that might be, in some instances, paying the extortion so that the business avoids a big business interruption.
So let's talk about that.
Okay.
So I know for a while, policy by FBI and CISA and everything was never pay the ransom because that's like negotiating with terrorists. Are you saying that sometimes you do recommend that they pay the ransom?
Yeah. Well, we don't pay the terrorists. So there is OFAC does provide a list of entities that we would not support a ransom payment to.
Mm-hmm.
And so if there is an extortion payment to be made, and there's a whole set of factors to evaluate before you get to that point. But throughout that process, we run it through the traps so that we are not paying a sanctioned entity, and the insured is not paying, and we're not supporting any of that. So right now, if an entity is on that OFAC sanctioned list, we would not participate in that transaction. The insured wouldn't. And so there is cyber extortion coverage by and large on these cyber policies. And it's not illegal to pay an extortion payment right now, barring what I just said.
Yeah, I get it.
So until the government, really intervenes in a stronger way.
Well, you got to do what's best for your client. I mean,
it's an evaluation of the factors. Yes.
Absolutely. But I want to reemphasize this. When you're taking cyber insurance, you're hiring an expert that if and when you are the victim, you've got some real expertise to help you recover, whether it's recovering your data, paying a ransom, getting your business up and running as quickly as possible. This isn't just, I buy insurance and they write a check.
No, that's right. And even more importantly now, cyber insurance is not just pay the premium, have your piece of paper, let's hope, cross fingers that nobody, gets a claim. It's a continuous process. And by that, I mean, the threat landscape is shifting in cyber. So if it's a different type of insurance, you know what the risk is. It's death, it's damage to your vehicle. Mm-hmm. In cyber, there are vulnerabilities out in the wild. The threat actors are shifting every day. And so what might have been a threat 6 months ago, today might completely look different. You're exposed in a completely different way than when you turned in your application. And so very important with that and how we can address and mitigate exposure is to keep our eye on that threat landscape. And then if there's something out in the wild, if there's a vulnerability, if a threat actor group is focused on an industry, if there's something there, then we as cyber insurers, and particularly at Cowbell, are proactive in informing our policyholders. Look, we've noticed your industry is being targeted. We notice a vulnerability in your software and that you haven't patched it. So it's a proactive engagement. And we have risk engineers at Cowbell who are watching what's going out in the wild. We learn from our claims. So if I see a bunch of claims targeting, a threat actor group targeting a particular scope of our policyholders, we're going to contact them and proactively help them be more resilient. And so that's a different approach to insurance than maybe some other lines. And it really is effective, and it has to be this way because, like I said, the threats are changing. We have to keep up. We have to keep up.
Well, and that's just unfortunately the nature of this security game. It's a cat and mouse. I'm going to ask, and you may not know the answer to this because I realize you're on the claim side of the house, but for the typical small to medium business, what does cyber insurance cost?
Well,
You have a
yeah. Well,
rule of thumb.
it depends, and the market is changing. It's pretty dynamic right now, and so it would depend on a few factors. And so I'll outline some of those factors, but it depends on their cybersecurity posture, right? So if you're just like in anything else where you're trying to buy insurance, what is your exposure? How are you protected? What's your level of cybersecurity? If you have better controls in place, you're probably going to get a better rate, right? Because you're more resilient. You're going to be able to mitigate claims. And so we look at those factors. Do you have multi-factor authentication? Do you have viable backups? So if you're hit with ransomware, you don't have to pay for decryptor because you can restore from viable backups that are offline and tested. Do you have an incident response plan? All these things will make you a more attractive potential insured.
Yep.
So you know what to do when something happens. Do you have best practices in place? Do you care about cybersecurity? Do you train your employees so they are aware? Phishing emails are a great way, a very common way, and it's a human element.
As well, we've been getting a lot of those.
The text messages. It's a proliferation of anything that can have a human kind of vulnerability too. So we have software vulnerabilities and we have humans, and so we do need to take care of that, and that's through training, through education. And so if an organization cares and is educating its workforce, then that can prevent a lot too. Segregation of systems. So if one part of the house is impacted, maybe it won't spread to the rest of it. And so all of these are taken into consideration, as well as what kind of data the organization might have. So as we know, the threat actors can trying to monetize. And so if they see an organization with the kind of juicy data that no one's watching, it's not being protected, and they can resell that, or that's a pressure. Yeah, it's a pressure point, right? So if they say, "Oh, we've taken your data in a ransomware transaction," that's going to be the pressure point for an organization to not be shamed and like, "Oh no, our business partners are going to know we didn't look after their data." So it's all, it's a group of factors that are in that evaluation of what an organization might pay. But, for sure it's becoming more expensive. The market is harder. There's more claims that are being paid, of course. And so part of that is driving the pricing. But also, I think part of it is that maybe I've heard comments that cyber insurance may be more difficult to get because of these maybe subjectivities or things that we as an insurer feel more comfortable if a policyholder has or cares about.
So that to me, though, is the difference between dealing with enterprise and small, medium. Enterprises will have incident response plans and teams. Enterprises will have contingencies. Enterprises have really thought about this. A lot of small to medium companies, the biggest hurdle is doing the paperwork around it, right? I don't have an incident response. Can you give me a vanilla one? I'll just put my name on it. I don't have, do we have two-factor authentication? Oh, no.
How do I get what? Yeah.
That. Well, no, they make it easy to do, whether you're using a Google Gmail or Microsoft or many apps. You could install it. Your employees are going to yell bloody murder because they hate doing it. But nevertheless, it's an important part of, we just did it with our Google accounts, for instance, because we use, a Google Suite backend.
Yeah.
We put 2FA in across the board. Our employees push back. Why do I have to do this? Well, because we said so. I'm sorry. What do you want me to say?
Well, it is a hassle. Some of this is a hassle, but you know what's more of a hassle? When your business goes down.
Exactly.
When you can't operate. Well, you can't access email at all.
Absolutely. And this is, that's the alternative.
Yeah.
Anyway, you know what we didn't tell people? Cowbell, where do they go to find out more?
Oh, so we have a website. I'll give it to you. But then also, I just did want to say that with Cowbell, we have those incident response plans. We have risk engineers to help the small to medium size, because we are very aware that that resources are limited in this segment of the market, and they just haven't had the opportunity to kind of really make a robust team. And so we will help with all those resources with no extra charge, because it does make them a more resilient insured. Cowbell Cyber AI. Yeah. Thank you.
Cowbellcyber.ai. All right.
Thank you
Teresa,
so
thank
much.
you so much. Hey, if you haven't got a cyber insurance for your company, go check out capitalcyber.ai. Its time has come. We're going to be back in a minute. I think our next guest is from our friends at Orca, and we'll be talking a little cloud native security here back in a moment.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, excuse me. We're back here in KubeCon, Cloud Native Con in Valencia. I don't know what it is, but the people come in waves, right? It gets a little quiet, and then all of a sudden, look, it's busy again. We try to filter out the noise, so hopefully you're not hearing too much, but it's a noisy, we're in a noisy area here. And it's just great to see. I haven't seen this many people in one place in a long time. It was yesterday was a little. It took me a little getting used to. But anyway, let me introduce you to Deep Tea Cigaretti.
Right. Yeah.
See, yeah, okay. Deep Tea is with Planet Scale, and if you were watching our coverage yesterday, we had Nick from Planet Scale on, but. The reason we brought Deep Tea on is, in addition to working at Planet Scale, she is one of the maintainers of the open source project Vitis, which is a graduated CNCF project. And we were just talking, I thought there was only about 8 graduated projects, but Deep Tea tells me we're up now to like 14 or something.
I may not have that number exactly right, but there have been several graduated projects.
So that's fantastic. Because for those who aren't familiar, reaching the graduated level is the highest CNCF level. And what it really means is that you have sort of a self-sustaining projects where the community is big enough, deep enough, involved enough. The maintainers and code contributors are broad enough and again deep enough that this project can kind of stand on its own 2 feet. It'll continue to grow and evolve and do its thing. Doesn't mean it's not a CNCF project anymore. It's just where it is in terms of support and all of that. Anyway, I've said my piece. Deep Tea, why don't you introduce yourself to our audience? Let's talk a little bit about what you did before being a maintainer on the project.
Okay. My name is Deepthi Sigreddy. I'm a software engineer at Planet Scale, where I lead the Vitis engineering team. And Vitis is the CNCF graduated project like Alan just told us. And I also play the role of technical lead for Vitis among the maintainers.
That's fantastic.
Vitis started at YouTube back in 2010, and in 2015, it had its first deployment outside of YouTube, and that was at Flipkart. And after that, several large companies adopted Vitis, including Square, Slack, Pinterest, GitHub, JD.com in China, and given Vitis's adoption, it was donated to CNCF in like 2017, 2018. And Planet Scale was started to, initially to pretty much provide Vitis as a service, but where Planet Scale is now has moved beyond allowing people to use Vitis to building a database that anybody can use, even if they have never heard of Vitis. So a database that everybody can use and love is what Planet Scale is all about.
So what's interesting is when we look at sort of the typical commercial open source business model, right? This is not unusual. You have a company that's formed that provides education, support, training, and then premium feature sets over and above the pure open source. And that was, as you mentioned, that was what Planet Scale, the initial kind of thought was.
Right.
But funny things happen in the market.
Yes.
and companies see what is available to them and what the customers want, what the market wants. And so that's the way it's gone.
Yeah.
I don't want to embarrass you, but I got to ask you some. So there's a lot of people watching out here. A lot of them are women or other underrepresented communities. And they say, look at this lady. She is the chief technical maintainer of this huge graduated project. And she's got it going on. And give them a little of your personal story. How did you come to be here?
So I graduated college with a degree in computer engineering.
Okay.
So to start with, I studied engineering, right? Electronics engineering and then computer engineering. I think what happens in many parts of the world is that many women never even go into a technical field. Societally, women are directed more towards the nurturing, caregiving, or artistic type of professions versus the hardcore technical engineering type of professions. But for whatever reason, I went to engineering school, and then I got a job as a software engineer at a supply chain optimization company called i2, which you might have heard of.
Okay.
Which was big in like the early 2000s. So I became a software engineer. Eventually, I became an engineering manager. But then I did have kind of a setback in the sense that not every work environment is equitable or friendly to the underrepresented categories of people. So there was a workplace where I was an engineering manager. I was at the table in the discussions. We are talking about company strategy, but I didn't really have a voice. And at that point, I was so disillusioned that I actually wanted to quit the industry, not just the company, right? So I ended up taking about 6 weeks off. I quit that job. I took about 6 weeks off, and then I started consulting. And I did consulting for about 4 or 5 years. And at that point, I had recovered enough from that experience that I wanted to be in the thick of things. As a consultant, I was sort of on the periphery to some extent. So I started looking for a full-time job again, and I guess it was just luck that to some extent brought me to PlanetScale.
Fate?
Yeah. I was one of the early employees at PlanetScale. I've been with the company for over 3 years. And what attracted me about PlanetScale was Vitess, because I had wanted to work on open source, and I had not done that before. And it wasn't something that I was able to do in my free time, because I had a job and a family and 2 children and a home, and you have to put time into everything. Yeah, but I think I was at a stage in my own life journey where things were easier because the kids were a little older. So
me too.
I could actually work at a startup without it being overwhelming.
Yeah.
And in terms of Vitess, once I joined PlanetScale, we were very small at that time. Besides the founders and the engineering lead, there were only 2 other engineers. I was one of 2 engineers. And we needed someone to start working on Vitess with Sugu, who is the founder of Vitess and a founder of PlanetScale. And that was me. So I started working with Sugu. And I have to say that Sugu has been an amazing mentor, sponsor to me, because he was in my role until late 2020. And then he actually transitioned the leadership role of Vitess and the engineering leadership role for Vitess in PlanetScale to me. So I've had these conversations with other women, and what we sort of agree on is that you can take as much initiative as you are able to. That's not sufficient. you need somebody to recognize that you have the potential and the ability and to sort of pull you up, sponsor you,
To
make
sponsor
way for
or-
you.
Right, make it possible.
Yeah.
So I'm going to tell you something. So we do some scholarships back home in Florida for underrepresented communities to learn to code, become software developers. So the fact is, in the country today, or in the U.S. at least, I think it is, there are more STEM degrees for women, awarded to women than there are to men. But much like you said, from the time they graduate college to the time you hit or work in the workforce, those numbers flip. And so though there are more STEM degrees awarded to women, much less women in STEM careers, in STEM jobs. And so something is wrong here, right? There's a disconnect. Women work hard, get their degrees, and then, much like you, I'm afraid, get discouraged or choose another path that maybe is a little easier. Like, no one wants to walk uphill. Maybe that one's downhill. I don't know. But there's that disconnect. And it is good to have a sponsor, right? I mean, but
It shouldn't be necessary.
that's the point. It shouldn't be necessary because, I mean, so here's the thing, so in baseball, there was a very famous manager in baseball called Branch Rickey. He was with the Brooklyn Dodgers before the Los Angeles Dodgers. He signed Jackie Robinson.
Okay.
He was the guy who brought Jackie Robinson into baseball. And he used to say that luck was 80% perspiration and 20% inspiration. Right? You make your own luck.
Yeah.
So I would like to think it wasn't that you were lucky to be at Planet Scale and become this person at Vitis. It was the culmination of everything you've been through in your life. And sometimes God has a plan and it just comes together, right? So you were in that right place at the right time. Excuse me, but had you not been through what you've been through, had you not had the education, had you not had the career, had you not already, had children raised that you could give the time to it, it all has to come together. But it's an interesting, as I sit here, I'm older, right? As I sit here, most everybody gets their moment, right? Gets their time. It's a question of, do they seize the moment, right? Do they seize the day?
Yes. I think that's a great point. So joining a startup is always a risk.
Yeah.
And there are times in your life when you feel like you can take the risk. And there are times when you don't feel ready to take the risk. And women are also many times socialized to be risk averse, to do the safe thing. I think it is changing though. When I see younger women,
Yes, it is.
people are much more open to taking risks, which I think is great.
Absolutely. Just real quickly before we go, because we have people waiting. For people who want to get information on Vitis, is it vitis.org or where do they go?
So we are at vitis.io, and myself and two other maintainers are here at the conference. We have a project booth in
very cool.
The other pavilion. It's
Hall 2.
It's in Hall 2, and we also have a maintainer talk tomorrow.
Great.
Tomorrow afternoon. And that's available on the virtual platform.
I was just going to say, if you're not here live, you can see it virtually as well.
Yeah.
And then Planet Scale is planetscale.com.
Planetscale.com, yes.
Deepthi, thank you so much for being our guest. It's a pleasure. Good luck. Keep us posted. Keep up the great work.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. All right, we're going to take a quick break. I think Mitchell may be coming on here for our next interview. We're live in Valencia at KubeCon, Cloud Native Con. We'll be right back.
Hi again, everyone. I hope you all enjoyed today's episode of Techstrong TV. Our hosts met with some industry experts to give you the most up-to-date information in the tech world. From our interviews at RSA and KubeCon Cloud NativeCon to the world premiere of Engineering the Change, today's slate was filled with amazing content. We'll be back again tomorrow, so please join us for that. Once again, thanks for watching, and we hope to see you again. As always, stay strong, tech strong.